People are starting to realize that Christendom is a better place to live. That's the West, or at least the way the West used to be. Prominent atheists like Richard Dawkins, famous podcaster Tim Pool, who is an agnostic at best, both have admitted that a Christian society is better for everybody, even if you don't believe. It's the way it's all ordered. Well, where has it gone? Well, if you destroy the patriarchy, you will destroy Christendom. And first wave feminism, that was their intention. That was their intention in the 19th century. You know what also happened in the 19th century? About, 30, 40 years before Seneca Falls, the convention of women that, they had their own Declaration of Sentiments, which was their own Declaration of Independence. And their goal was to tear down the family, tear down the patriarchy. Do you know what that means? Tearing down men. It's tearing down men. Patriarch, father, God the Father, the man, the head of the household. Tear it all down is what they wanted. And when you tear that down, you tear down Christendom. The Grimm brothers were a couple of brothers who were on their way to be lawyers like their deceased father before them. But they came across some folklore. And that derailed that whole plan because they recognized that their culture was eroding and they wanted to save it. And they understood keeping the ideals and norms alive was the way to do that. So they understood that folklore was essential because it teaches children and it reinforces in adults the truths of the Bible. It's just the case. Well, just like the Grimm brothers understood that we have to keep infusing and strengthening these ideals and truths into society, guess what happens when you take them away and turn it into Disney fairy tales and, even Pixar movies and stuff? What happens then? Well, the opposite happens. And that's what we're seeing. And interestingly enough, the downfall of society is correlating right with it. So what we do on Sunday is we dig into it. We revive these truths and these meanings, that this meaning and truth we always used to know. And we elevate the patriarchy. Ooh, I feel so scandalous, right? Oh gosh, we should actually restore men's place in society? Say it isn't so. It's so scandalous and controversial. That's what they want it to be. So let's rebel and get into it. Welcome back to Far From. Today, next up in our book, look how far through it we are. These are the original fairy tales published in 1812 and 1815. We had to go back to the first publishing because guess what? They already started changing them like immediately. You have to know that that's all intended. Anyway, today is Johann Waterspring and Caspar Waterspring. I'm going to get into it. I never read these in advance because I want to experience them with you. A king insisted his daughter was not to marry and had a house built for her in the most secluded part of a forest. She had to live there with her ladies in waiting, and no other human being was allowed to see her. Now, this was not common back then. The whole idea usually in these stories is that the father wanted to find the best that he could for his daughter. And he wanted to raise his daughter to be pious and have a servant's heart and be actually feminine, not dress up feminine like today's women, but actually feminine in all the ways that you guys understand and appreciate. So this is a little off track from usual, and I'm really excited to see where they're going with it. Near the house in the woods, however, there was a spring with marvelous qualities, and when the princess drank from it, she consequently gave birth to two princes. They were identical twins and named after the spring, Johann Water Spring and Caspar Water Spring. Their grandfather, the old king, had them instructed in hunting, and as they grew older, they became big and handsome young men. When the day arrived for them to set out into the world, each received a silver star, a horse, and a dog to take on the journey. Once they came to a forest, they immediately saw two hares and wanted to pew them. It's YouTube. But the hares asked for mercy and said that they would like to serve them and that they could be useful and help them whenever they were in danger. The two brothers let themselves be persuaded and took them along as servants. Soon after, they came upon two bears, and when they took aim at them, these animals also cried out for mercy and promised to serve them faithfully. So, oh goodness. So their retinue was increased. You guys have to help me with that word, retinue. I know we have some linguistics in the linguistics? People who are good at linguistics in the chat. By Sunday, words are hard. The retinue was increased, and now they came to a crossroad where they asked, "We've got to separate here, and one of us should go to the right, and the other should head off to the left." Before doing this, each of them stuck a knife in a tree and crossed at the crossroad so that they could determine by the rust whether the other was faring well and whether he was still alive. Then they took leave from another, kissed one another, and rode off. Because back then, nobody was like, "Ew, you're gay," or whatever. They didn't say that. It wasn't really a thing. Johann Water Spring came to a city that was pure. Johann Water Spring, the train is distracting. I'm so sorry, you guys. Johann Water Spring came to a city that was quite still and sad because the princess was to be sacrificed to a dragon that was devastating the entire country and could be pacified only by this sacrifice. It was announced that whoever wanted to risk his life and end the dragon would receive the princess for his bride. However, nobody had volunteered. They had also tried to trick the monster by sending out the princess's chambermaid. But the dragon realized what was happening right away and did not take the bait. Reminds me of like slaying the dragon for the princess. Here's the thing though. Back then, the princess actually had value. It's not how we've been accustomed to thinking of, a princess. Like she doesn't have to do anything. Nothing's expected of her. Soft life, right? That's Disney. That's Disney telling you that. An actual princess has duties and responsibilities. That is so far from our minds that it's easy for us to just accept that a princess is just pretty and just gets everything handed to her. It's actually not the case. They were expected to be certain things and do certain things. Johann Waterspring thought, you must try your luck. Perhaps you'll succeed. And so he set out with his company and headed toward the dragon's nest. The battle was fierce. The dragon spewed forth fire and flames and ignited all the grass around them, so that Johann Waterspring certainly would have suffocated if the hare, dog, and bear had not stamped out and subdued the fire. Finally, the dragon succumbed, and Johann Waterspring cut off its 7 heads and then sliced its 7 tongues. Sounds like the beast in Revelation. Is anybody else getting that? Seems like it. Also, he was born of Immaculate Conception. So there's some interesting themes we have going on here. So interested to see what you guys think about this. Okay. Slice its 7 tongues, which he stuck into his sack. Now, however, he was so tired that he lay down right at that spot and fell asleep. While he was sleeping, the princess's coachman arrived, and when he saw the man lying there and the 7 heads next to him, he thought, you've got to take advantage of this. Uh-oh. So he, stuck with the very pointy thing, Johann Waterspring. It's funny, I have such a time with the fairy tales and YouTube censorship. Isn't that funny? They're fairy tales. Oh well. Forces me to get creative. Oh. So he did that, and Johann Waterspring was no more. And the coachman took the 7 heads with him. He carried everything to the king and said he had ended the monster. Indeed, he had brought the 7 heads as evidence, and the princess became his bride. Nope. In the meantime, Johann Waterspring's animals had set up camp nearby after the battle and had also slept. When they returned to their master, they found him no more. As they were looking, they saw how the ants whose mound had been stamped on during the battle were spreading the sap from an oak tree on their dead ones. And these ants immediately came back to life. So the bear went and fetched some of the sap, and he spread it on Johann Waterspring. Shortly thereafter, Johann was completely well and healthy and thought about the princess for whom he had fought. So he was born of Immaculate Conception. He fought a dragon, and now he's been raised. All right. So he rushed to the city where her marriage to the coachman was being celebrated. And the people were saying that the coachman had ended the 7-headed dragon. Johann Waterspring's dog and bear ran into the castle, where the princess tied some roast meat and wine around their necks and ordered her servants to follow the animals and to invite their owner to the wedding. So now Johann Waterspring showed up at the wedding just as the platter with the 7 dragon heads was being displayed. These were the heads that coachman had brought with him, but now Johann Waterspring pulled out the 7 tongues from his sack and placed them next to the heads. Consequently, he was declared the real dragon slayer and became the princess's husband, while the coachman was was banished. Not long thereafter, Johann went out hunting and followed a deer with silver antlers. He hunted the deer for a long time but could not catch it. Finally, he met an old woman who turned him and his dog, horse, and bear into stone. Man, what is up? Almost every single time, there's some old woman living by herself in a house somewhere. She's always going to do something like that. These stories warn us. I think today we kind of call them Karens or flat out witches. And they're reading tarot cards and they're manifesting and all this stuff. And you know what? They're either already winding up alone or they're going to. I'm just saying, they did warn us not to trust. These are women with no patriarch. There's no father, there's no husband, there's no anything, and there's certainly no reverence or fear of the Lord. Just turn them into stone, just for no reason. I mean, for fun. Goodness gracious. Okay. Meanwhile, Caspar Waterspring returned to the tree in which he and his brother had stuck their knives and saw that his brother's knife had rusted. He immediately decided to search for his twin and rode off. Soon he came to the city where his brother's wife was living. She thought he was her real husband because he looked just like him and was delighted by his return and insisted that he stay with her. But Caspar Waterspring continued traveling. He could have really just exchanged himself for his brother, couldn't he? He could have just taken his brother's place, but he didn't. He could have been like, oh, cool, I'm married to the princess now. Oh, well. But he didn't. I just wanted to pause and point that out. Good character. Caspar Waterspring continued traveling until he found his brother and animals all turned into stone. Soon after, he forced the old woman to break the magic spell, and then the brothers rode toward their home. Along the way, they agreed that the first one to be embraced by the princess should be her husband. Well, it turned out to be Johann Waterspring. The end. They showed mercy to the animals who asked for mercy. They showed loyalty to one another, brotherhood. Johann showed bravery and initiative. The princess waited for him, obviously. She didn't go be hypergamous and what have you. See what I mean? All those things, all those values. Wouldn't it be so much better if we were reading this to kids rather than showing them some Disney movie, some Pixar movie, whatever the other movies are? Wouldn't it be better if we were reading this? Yes, the answer is yes, because it takes the values and truths of the Bible and it infuses it into other stories. And that's what we need to do. We need to take those things that we learn from the Bible and apply it everywhere, just everywhere. And good things happen. Good things happen. Just ask atheist Richard Dawkins. It's just true. It's just true. And truth will always win. It will always be stronger than the lies, the propaganda, and everything. And that's why it's rising back up. There's a resurgence of truth. Thank God. Okay, now to our next fairy tale. All right, we skipped over the bird phoenix because we read that last week. Sometimes I have to, when there's a long one, I put a small one in there, just in case anybody had the same book and they're following along and they're like, she skipped that one. Okay, the next one we're going to read today is called The Carnation. A long time ago, there lived a king who never wanted to marry. It was MGTOW, the MGTOW king. All right. A long time ago, there lived a king who never wanted to marry. Now, one day, he stood at a window and watched some people entering the church. Among them was a maiden who was so beautiful that he immediately abandoned his resolution. So he had the maiden summoned to him and chose her for his wife. I know all of us who were like, no, walk away. Although in these times, maybe you didn't need to. Who knows? Maybe he thought, I just don't want to bother with the headache, right? Better to live on the corner of a roof. That's what the Bible says, than with a, can't remember the exact words, but then with a nasty one. So he chose her for his wife. After 1 year had passed, she gave birth to a prince, and the king didn't know whom to ask to be the godfather. Finally, he said, the first man I meet, no matter who it is, I'll ask him to be the godfather. He went out, and the first person he met was a poor old man, and he asked him to be the godfather. The poor man agreed, but requested that he be the only one to carry the child into the church, that the church was to be locked, and that nobody be allowed to observe the ceremony. All this was granted. However, the king had an evil, curious gardener. And when the old man carried the child into the church, he sneaked after him and hid himself among the benches. Soon he watched the old man carrying the child before the altar and blessing him. The old man seemed to be someone who understood secret powers, and he gave the child the gift of realizing everything he wished for. The evil gardener immediately thought how advantageous it would be for him if he had the child. So one day, when the queen went for a walk and carried the child in her arm, the gardener tore it away from her, smeared her mouth with the arterial fluid of a slaughtered chicken, and accused her of ending and eating her child in the garden. Now, see, she was walking by herself with her child. We used to kind of know that leaving women unprotected would not be a good thing, because we are weaker and there are bad people out there. And so Little Red Riding Hood, Sleeping Beauty, all these women were alone when this happened. And some of the men out there will say, yeah, but why is it our responsibility? Because you used to get something in return. That's why. We used to cooperate and complement each other and both exchange something to do that, and not in such a transactional way like it is now, where women are like, basically the dating scene is, prostitution, because you get what, a dinner that's expensive, and so then your body is the transaction. This was not like that. This was virtuous things that we complemented each other with. And like this king, he decided he didn't want to get married. That's fine. That's totally fine. Oh gosh. So the king had her thrown into prison, while the gardener sent the child far away to a forester in the woods. He was supposed to raise the child, and it was there that the prince learned all about hunting. Moreover, the forester had a beautiful daughter by the name of Lisa, and the two young children became very fond of one another. Lisa revealed to him that he was a prince and that he had the power to realize every wish he made. How did Lisa know that? Women's intuition. I don't know. But see what I mean? That's helpful. He wouldn't have known without her. Women, one of our responsibilities, I believe, we need to see the good in our husbands. We need to believe in him and let him know that. Tell him all the things that he's talented at, that he's good at. Infuse that confidence into him. Build him up. Build up your husbands. He will feel like he can take on the world, and he'll do the things that, he actually wants to do. He'll believe that he can. And it's such a good thing. And this is what Lisa did here. She said, no, you're just not the son of a forester. You're a prince, and you have the capability to make these things come true. You actually can do it. And without that, he would have just stayed a forester's son, and he would never have realized his true potential and who he was on the inside. He never would have seen it. I caught that one. That's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Mothers used to do that for their sons too. The mothers would do it, and then the wives would do it. But like we talked about in my conversation with Paul Elam, no. Mothers nowadays want to, paralyze their sons so that they don't branch off into the world because it's scary, because something could happen. They make them afraid to do that. They absolutely destroy the confidence in the boy. Then he never leaves. Then mommy's always the safe place. And then she doesn't have to be alone. And he's her little servant boy. And then he goes and becomes the servant boy for his wife. No, he should grow up. When the boy grows up, he outranks his mother. We don't act like that nowadays. We don't have the boy outrank his mother. He's always answering to her. That's backwards. Lisa spoke the faith into him. Good job, Lisa. All right. I was so excited about Lisa that, of course, I lost my spot. Okay. The evil gardener immediately thought how advantageous it would be for him if he had the child. Oh, I already read that. You guys, Lisa got me so happy. Okay, here we are. Sorry. Lisa spoke faith into him. After some time had passed, the gardener came to the forester. And when the prince saw him, he immediately wished the gardener to become a poodle, and his dear Lisa a carnation. He stuck her on himself, and the poodle had to run alongside the prince. Then he went to his father's court, where he entered the royal service as hunter, and soon he became the king's favorite hunter because he could pew any kind of animal in the forest. All the prince had to do was to wish, and the animals came running to him. Despite all the services he rendered the king, the prince did not ask to be compensated. Serving, for the act of serving. That was some way you could prove yourself. Not by taking advantage or any of that. This is just beautiful. He only asked for a room for himself, and that he kept locked. And he insisted on taking care of meals for himself. All this seems strange to his fellow hunters, especially his refusal to receive wages, so that one of his comrades followed him and looked through the keyhole. All at once, he saw the new hunter sitting at the table next to a beautiful maiden who was his dear Lisa, whom he changed into her natural form whenever he was in the room. She kept him company whenever they were alone, and whenever he went out, she became a carnation again and stood in a glass of water. She waited for him. She stayed true to him. She wasn't thinking about how she deserved more, and this is boring, and why do I have to be a carnation? No, women didn't do that, except the women who lived alone and turned people into stone. The hunters thought that he must have a great amount of wealth and broke into his room when the prince went out hunting. However, they found absolutely nothing, only the carnation on the windowsill. Since the flower was so beautiful, they brought it to the king, who became so very fond of it that he demanded it from the hunter. However, the young hunter refused to give it to him, even for all the money in the world, because the flower was his beautiful Lisa. Finally, when the king insisted on having it, the hunter revealed everything that had happened and that he was his son. When the king heard this, he rejoiced with all his heart. The queen was released from the prison, and the faithful Lisa became the prince's wife. The godless gardener was compelled to remain a poodle for the rest of his life and was often kicked by the servants when he lay underneath the table. They taught everyone to do the right thing, to be faithful and true. So many that these stories have been just infused with so much truth and instruction on how we should be. Today's women would have us believe that in the past, men just wanted to own women and oppress them and all the rest of it. That is not the case. It would be reflected in our stories. It would be reflected in our history. There's nothing. There's no proof of that. It's made up. That's not the nature of the men of Christendom. We would not have had such a flourishing society if it were. Let's see if we have time for one more. It's just too fun. Okay. I skipped ahead a little bit and found a short one. We just skipped over one, I think, that we'll come back to. We skipped over to the carpenter and the turner and the old grandfather and the grandson. We will come back to those. Here is a little bit of a short one called The Water Nixie. Okay. I'm scared of the last one. The last one's always very trippy. Okay. A little brother and a little sister were playing near a well. And as they were playing, they both fell into the water. The water nixie was there and said, "Now I've got you, and now be good children and work nice and hard for me." Then she gave the maiden some dirty, tangled flax to spin and also a hollow bucket to fetch water. The young boy had to chop down a tree with a blunt axe, and all they got to eat were dumplings as hard as rocks. Eventually, the children lost their patience, and one Sunday, they waited until the nixie was in church. Oh, they went to church. Sure, went to church and, stole a couple children and made them work. And then ran away. Okay. They waited until the nixie was in church and then they ran away. After the church service was over, the nixie saw that the chickens had fled the coop, and she set out after them as fast as she could. The children saw her coming from afar, and the maiden threw a brush behind her. The brush changed into a huge mountain of bristles with thousands and thousands of thorns. The nixie had great difficulty in climbing over them. When the children saw her, the boy threw a comb behind him that changed into a huge mountain with thousands and thousands of spikes. But the nixie was able to grab hold of them and climb over the mountain. Now the maiden threw a mirror behind her that formed a glass mountain that was so very, very slippery that the nixie couldn't climb over it. So she thought, "I'd better go home and fetch my axe and split the mountain in two. However, by the time she had returned and had smashed the glass, the children had long since made their escape, and the water nixie had to return to tread water in her well. I'm not sure what that story means, but I do think it's interesting that they threw a brush and a comb and a mirror. Why those items? These are all items for, the exterior, making someone look better and checking it out. Isn't it interesting that they threw those things behind them? Like they let go of superficiality. I might be reaching, but I know that the meanings in these stories can be very deep. And the things that they say are for a reason. So brush, comb, mirror, throwing those things behind them. And the mirror is what stopped her. That's the thing that you could use to admire yourself, right? What was their real purpose of a mirror? I mean, if you think about it, what is the purpose of a mirror? To check how you look. And that's what stopped her. That's what saved them. It's almost like letting go of that superficiality of the narcissism, because that's Narcissus who was looking, in the water, admiring his, beautiful looks and fell in. You got to let that go to go on and do important things, survive. I don't know. You guys tell me if I'm reaching, but I know there's a purpose in it. It's a short one. Interesting. So that is where we conclude for this Sunday. I appreciate you guys. I love reading these stories. Continue to feed your souls. And you know what? I was taking Lola for a walk this morning, and I was thinking about today and literary archaeology and everything, and how we're just seeking truth. At the end of the day, with all of the videos that I present, I hope that you guys you get that all I want is truth. And I know that when you seek truth, you're seeking all of these things. You will find Christendom. You will find the good of the patriarchy. You will find God at the end of the day. You will. So what I was thinking when I was taking her for the walk is that, what feeds the soul more than anything, I think? Truth. It's literally food for your soul. You just take it in. And because I know you guys love truth, even if you're not a Christian, what have you, you want to seek truth. And there's a reason. Because it's what feeds us. It leads us to meaning and purpose. So you don't always need to go in nature, although it helps, especially men, to feed your souls. You just seek truth like we're doing with our literary archaeology. So, also, protect your peace at all costs. I love you guys so much, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.